All right, let's just jump right in. For what feels like forever, right? We've been dealing with AI that talks to us with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. But what if we could get past that? Today, we're going to dig into how to create a more nuanced, indirect tone for AI. How to turn these clunky tools into actual, collaborators. And this quote from the source material, man, it just nails the problem with today's direct default AI, doesn't it? I mean, yeah, it's functional, it gets the job done, but it is completely lifeless. It completes a task, but it's missing that spark, that thing that makes human conversation actually engaging. And just look at this comparison. It shows you the difference perfectly. On the left, you get this cold, blunt fact, error. On the right, you get something considerate. The first one feels like you just hit a digital brick wall. The other one, it feels like an invitation, like, hey, let's figure this out together. And that is the core of what we're going to unpack today. Okay, so let's really get into this whole clunky direct default thing. What are we talking about? We're talking about that just painful literalness that stops an AI from being a truly great partner. It kind of traps it in this conversational cul-de-sac. So what's the alternative, right? Well, it's the power of subtlety. And look, mastering an indirect tone, it's a huge challenge, no doubt about it. But the payoff? Oh, the payoff is an experience that's just more intuitive, more effective, and honestly, way more human. I just love this line from the source material. It really frames the whole situation perfectly. So, why? Why is this juice worth the squeeze? Why should we wrestle with this big, complicated beast of indirectness instead of just sticking with the simple, robotic approach we've always had? Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. What nuance does is it completely transforms the interaction. It takes a conversation from being just a simple transaction, like give me this data, to being a genuine interaction. An AI that can just offer a little touch of acknowledgement. It builds a real connection. And that connection, well, that's the bedrock of user trust. And it goes even deeper than that. Subtlety lets an AI handle bad news with some grace, which is absolutely crucial. Plus, and this is a big one, not every culture out there values being super direct. An AI that can adapt to high-context cultures, places where so much of the meaning is implied instead of spelled out, is just going to be more effective and frankly more respectful on a global scale. And here's a perfect real-world example. Instead of just a blunt payment declined, this phrasing totally softens the blow. It gives you the info you need without making you feel like you've just been, digitally slapped in the face. It's the difference between using a blunt instrument and a finely tuned one. It's huge. Okay, but hold on. Before we all rush off to design these super subtle chatbots, we have to talk about the risks. Because trying to create this kind of indirectness, it's a total high-wire act. When it works, it's incredible. But when it fails, oh boy, it is a spectacular disaster. So what's the catch? That's the key question, right? If nuance so great, why isn't every single AI already doing it? Well, the answer is that the pitfalls are massive, and they require some really serious thought. All right, here are the big ones. First up, misinterpretation. I mean, if an AI just hints at something really urgent and the user completely misses it, that's a huge problem. Second, the sheer technical challenge is staggering. This is not a weekend coding project, folks. And finally, all that complexity, it needs more computational power, which, you guessed it, means higher costs. And then there's this. We've all heard of the uncanny valley with visuals, right? Where something looks almost human, but not quite, and it's just creepy. Well, it exists for tone, too. An AI that tries to be subtle and fails is way more jarring and unsettling than one that's just, honestly, openly robotic. It can shatter trust in an instant. Which brings us to one of the absolute trickiest parts, the data itself. You see, AI models learn from these enormous amounts of text written by humans, and that text contains everything. All the good, the bad, and the ugly patterns of how we communicate. So a nuanced AI can accidentally pick up and subtly replicate some really undesirable patterns from that data. And they can be incredibly hard to spot and fix. And this phrase it nails the issue. Garbage in, subtle garbage out. If the training data is full of flawed or biased examples of nuance, the AI isn't just going to learn them, it might actually amplify them. So this raises this huge engineering question. How in the world do you teach an AI to use nuance without also teaching it to copy our own hidden biases? Okay, so we've seen the amazing promise and the terrifying perils. Let's switch gears from the problems to the solutions. Look, building an AI with an effective indirect tone isn't magic. It's a very, very specific kind of engineering. So here's a high-level framework for how you can even begin to approach it. So this framework breaks it all down into 4 key steps. First, you have to know your audience. Intimately. Second, you got to define the AI's core personality so that it subtly actually feels natural and not just tacked on. Third, context is king. The AI has to understand the entire conversation, not just the last sentence. And finally, and this is so important, don't try to boil the ocean. Start small, test everything, and iterate, iterate, iterate. So on the technical side, you've basically got 2 main paths. You've got rule-based systems, which give you a ton of control, but they're pretty brittle and hard to scale. Then you have machine learning systems, which are super scalable and sound way more natural, but you have a lot less control. So what's the sweet spot? Well, a lot of the time, it's some kind of hybrid approach that takes the best of both worlds. Now this is absolutely critical. What happens when the AI's attempt at subtlety just completely fails and the user is totally confused? You need an escape hatch. The AI has to be smart enough to realize, hey, this isn't working, and immediately switch to a clear, direct, let me clarify this for you mode. Reliability means always having a fallback plan. So, as we start to wrap this up, let's bring it all back to that core idea. The next great leap for AI, it isn't just about being smarter in terms of raw intelligence. It's about mastering the art of communication. And nuance? Nuance is a total game-changing piece of that evolution. And this last quote just says it all, doesn't it? Adding an indirect tone is a serious capability. It's a power tool, not a toy. It demands really rigorous engineering, a deep understanding of your users, and an unwavering commitment to ethics. This is not a feature you just sprinkle on at the end. And so that leaves us with this final question to chew on. The difference between an AI that just gives you information and one that truly collaborates and communicates with you, well, it could all come down to this very art of subtlety. And the choice of how we build that future, that's up to us.